Hello and welcome back to All for Women's Football. Today we're discussing all things Euro 2025 qualifiers, as well as a sprinkling of international friendlies that have been happening and going on. So we'll be touching on all the talking points throughout the next hour or so. So do stay with us and obviously join in the chat with all your opinions. But without further ado, we will get going. Hello, yes, welcome back to everyone. Good evening. Nice to have everyone back with us for this show about Euro qualifiers. We have some familiar faces and some new faces. So we'll start with a new face, Gina. Lovely to have you on the show. How are you? And introduce yourself a little bit in terms of your background in journalism and kind of where you're approaching this panel from.
Yeah, doing well. My name is Gina Bagnulo. I focus on Irish women's football. I used to live in Dublin, so I started my sports journalism career there. And because of that, I'm very attached to the Girls in Green and have covered them since their Nations League campaign last year in late 2023, fresh off their World Cup appearance, and have seen them grow since. So really looking forward to potentially seeing them make a Euros appearance next summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect guest to have on tonight because we will be talking a lot about Ireland, of course. And Liberty, great to have you back. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me back. This is the first time I think I've been on where we've not talked about international league football. I feel like I'm always either talking about Germany or international leagues in general. So it's quite nice to be talking about some countries for once.
Yeah, a bit of international break, actually. I don't feel like I've been on an international kind of break talking show for quite a while as well. So it's nice to have a bit of a change. I do miss some of the league stuff while there's the international break on, but I feel like this one's a bit more exciting because there's actually stuff at stake, which is nice. Connor, how are we?
Yeah, it's been a different kind of day. All good. It's interesting actually, isn't it? It's quite the irony that I'm always the one that's complained about internationals, yet I'm the one chosen to come on the panel to talk about internationals. So, yeah, obviously Scotland's going to be my key area of focus. But I agree with what you just said there. It's nice to actually have, not that the other games aren't meaningful, but actually these do, obviously, for qualification for the Euros rather than, I know we're going to talk about the friendlies, but just random friendlies thrown in.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I'm more invested in the stuff that's going on around them for sure. I didn't really have the hype for kind of the Lionesses US friendly beforehand. I obviously got on board with it when it was on and stuff, but yeah, these definitely feel like they got a bit more meaning. I guess we'll kick it off then just by kind of talking a bit about what people's expectations maybe were going into them and whether there were any shocks to particularly the Euro qualifiers and kind of just that initial impressions, if there's anything you want to bring up off the bat, and we'll obviously go into them a little bit more depth later on, but just go around the panel, start with you maybe, Gina, and just what did you expect, and did it were there anything that didn't play out the way you thought it would, or kind of general takes from this international break?
Well, I will say that going into it, I think most people, both on my part and the coaches for the Irish team, thought that the Welsh team and the Irish team were equally matched. The last time the two had faced off was February of this year for a friendly, where Wales beat Ireland at Tallaght Stadium. And of course, it had to be Lily Woodham and Jess Fishlock that scored in that game. And of course, prophetically, we had Lily Woodham score again in this Euro qualifier with an assist from Jess Fishlock. So that was almost like the universe was telling us something. I was honestly very impressed with Ruesha Littlejohn. I think over the past few years, she's succumbed to several injuries. And because of that, I think to an extent she has sort of gained a reputation of being maybe a player that is easily injured. And she is sort of being in her mid-30s, maybe is getting towards the end of her career. And that's not to say that she's not a high caliber player, because she is, and she's shown that. So with her goal, her long shot that was let in by Olivia Clark by default was such an amazing goal. I don't think anyone really saw that coming. And I think it was such a special moment for her, having been ruled out by London City Lionesses for a few months due to an injury, and just to come back to the international break and to perform at that level was something so special for Ruesha Littlejohn, and I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was a spectacular effort. If anyone's not seen that goal, it is well worth watching, because it kind of goes down as an own goal and you're expecting it to kind of just be one of those fumbles in the box, and it's really anything but. It's pretty incredible from Littlejohn there. We will go into that match a little bit more detail. Liberty, anything from you in terms of standouts from the international break in general?
I don't think we are set to discuss it, but I just want to give a moment for Portugal and Czechia game 1-1, which may be slightly unexpected. Maybe they think people would have assumed Portugal maybe would take that, especially at home. But obviously the standout is there was a record crowd in Portugal for that match. Big turnout, 40,000 odd, around about there, maybe just over. And I think there's been, obviously we had the friendly record at Wembley, big crowds in Wales. I think Sean will correct me if he was here, but this is wrong. But I believe it was a record crowd in Wales for the Ireland game. This international break seems to be breaking all the records across Europe. And it's just really great to see. But then the flip side is a friend of mine, Laura, she's a Spanish reporter. She was saying basically that she felt quite upset that she's not seeing the same in Spain. And I just think it kind of puts into perspective those kinds of things, that we can have massive record crowds in England, in Wales. It's going to be a really great turnout tomorrow in Ireland as well. And in Portugal, but then it's not happening the same everywhere. And I think there is an unfortunate sadness to that I do think deserves a mention, because it is sad. It is sad, but it is also something that there's only room to improve, and it has to happen at some point in Spain and in these other countries that aren't getting the same kind of attention. So yeah, that's maybe a slightly less happy takeaway from this international break.
Yeah, no, but I think you're right. I think it's really important to mention, and I think especially with the Spain in particular, it's that kind of, why can't we have bounced off the World Cup win in the same way that maybe England did after the Euros? I know that was a home tournament, it's slightly different, but you've got that momentum, and why isn't that being carried through to be like, come and look at our like world champions team on home soil, and yeah, definitely something that needs to be kind of reflected on and maybe spoken about a bit more. So thank you for bringing that up. Connor, anything from you in terms of what you expected? Did it play out the way you thought it would, and anything that didn't play out the way you thought it would from the international break?
I'm going to save the Scotland bit for that game, because I think that probably didn't go the way I thought, so I'll come back to that. I know you've started a comment about Sweden and Norway. I think that's still a bit of a surprise that teams like that are in this qualification round, particularly Norway. I talk about this every time I'm on this channel. Like, that Norwegian squad is so far under, I think, where the talent level is in the squad. Now, obviously, there's always arguments that just because you've got individual players doesn't necessarily make you a great team. You need a team of players rather than individuals. That's probably Norway's issue. And their backline isn't the strongest, although I think it's probably the strongest they've had for a while, certainly since the Euros anyway. So that's a bit of a surprise. They've obviously, we'll get to, they've made easy work of their run through anyway. But yeah, I think maybe the Scotland was still a little bit of a standout. I expected a little bit more, I can't lie, but I'll come back to some of the specifics in that in a second. A big surprise for me, actually, was how quick and I hope some of them was watching, how quick some of my mates got away from Wembley, because I know what that can be like. But Liberty's shaking her head, but people I spoke to, they got back record time. So that was a surprise, I think, on that one. But I don't think Liberty had that same experience.
I think I was stood outside. Okay, so for context, I was maybe 5 rows from the back, right at the top of Wembley. So it wasn't like necessarily easy access, and also I was the wrong side of the stadium to where I needed to get to for the tube. So there was like a lot of factors against me, but I generally think I was stood in that queue for maybe 40, maybe 50 minutes, which is the longest that's the longest I've ever been stuck on Wembley Way. I got out quicker to Taylor Swift, which I think I was stood waiting to get out of Taylor Swift for 25 minutes. I generally think pushing 50 minutes tops on Saturday night was very bad.
See, just shows it's not the same for everyone, is it? But I did see a few people. Sorry, Laura, I'm going to rush off again. But the start of the Lionesses game, I did see some people comparing it to Taylor Swift with everything that was going on with the lights and the music and everything else. So maybe you did get some kind of flashbacks to that concert as well, because I think I did see a few tweets like that.
Everyone's like, oh, the metric for women's football success should be like the men's equivalent. But I actually think now that the metric for women's football success in terms of attendance should be Taylor Swift concert.
Yeah, like a direct comparison with the stadium, whichever stadium it is. Can we get more women's games at Anfield or something? I mean, that's what Nikki Dees asked for, isn't it? The Taylor Swift fans. So maybe they are doing that in actuality. Yeah, we will move over on to some of the games a little bit more in depth. I've got my plan here. So I'm just referring to. But I'm thinking. So we'll start with the Ireland versus Wales game. Obviously, two teams from the British Isles. Obviously not. We won't get into the politics of that, but two relatively local teams that I'm sure a lot of people have some investment in. But obviously, Gina has been following the Irish team a little bit closer than perhaps some of the rest of us. I guess, what were your concerns when Wales went ahead and concerns going into this game, and maybe kind of going forward into the next game? What do you want to see more of, either from both teams? Like, what does each team need to do if they're going to do well tomorrow and actually going to make it through to the Euros?
I think, I was in the press box at Tallaght Stadium when they were going against Georgia, and all I was doing was checking Wales's game against Slovakia, I believe it was. So I was checking that score over and over, and I think every other reporter in that press box was checking that score, because we kind of knew that Wales was going to be Ireland's tougher option in terms of opposition. So now that we have that, now that Ireland is going to face off against Wales once more, it is a bit of pressure, because as I've said, Ireland actually are a few places ahead of Wales in the FIFA Women's World Rankings. So statistically, there is that advantage. But in terms of ability, in terms of the number of expatriate players, of Welsh internationals and Irish internationals in the WSL, it's pretty equal measure. So in terms of ability, capability, experience, they're pretty equal. And so going into tomorrow, I mean, it's been amazing just to see the transition. I was out of the Aviva Stadium. I wasn't in my reporting capacity, but I remember being there in September of 2023, the first time the women's national team played at the Aviva. I believe it was around 35,000 people went to go see the game against Northern Ireland. I think that was the first of their Nations League games last year in their Nations League campaign. And it was just really good to see, because it was a historic day. And I think tomorrow is going to be reminiscent of that historic day as well, because I think part of the marketing scheme that the FAI has been employing for ticket sales is really how it's going to be a historic, monumental day before Ireland could possibly qualify for the Euros or not. And of course, the last game, Ireland kind of have the last say, because this is a game on home soil, the Aviva Stadium, which is definitely, if not Ireland's most iconic stadium, especially when it comes to football. And as far as I know, as of this morning, around 25,000 tickets have been sold already. So it's really shaping up to look like, a huge attendance is going to be present tomorrow, as there was, as you said, for the game in Cardiff, which was around, I think, 16,000 people went to go see the game in Cardiff, which is great. I mean, you could see, even then I could see the Irish banners with the Irish flags and the emblems of the teams in the WSL that the Irish internationals are playing for. I could see Crystal Palace Irish flag banners, Liverpool Irish flag banners, which was really great to see. And I think what's also very interesting is that a bunch of these players play on the same WSL teams. So to an extent, I think they both the Welsh internationals and the Irish internationals have that advantage over one another, in the sense of the fact that they know how they play. they know their styles, like Lily Woodham being on loan at Crystal Palace along with Abby Larkin and Izzy Atkinson. And then obviously Carrie Holland playing for Wales is like Leanne Kiernan's roommate and teammate at Liverpool, as she is Niamh Fahey's as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I think Ireland is going to feel a little bit of pressure, but there was a little bit on that sort of like note of pressure. There was a little bit of tension, I think, after the match today. Katie McCabe described, I think, fouls or the way that Wales was playing as cheap shots to a press conference this morning. So that's
interesting
that she would describe it that way. I think in the moment she may have been referring to like the yellow card, or Ruesha Littlejohn being booked for elbowing Jess Fishlock in that moment. Unfortunately, while it was a great game for her, that still happened to Littlejohn, unfortunately. And the Welsh coach as well sort of expressed like kind of the dissatisfaction that she had with the way that the Irish were playing. But then Eileen Gleeson sort of said that, like, listen, it's not really my priority to care about, what she thinks. Like, all I can do is continue on in this qualifier campaign and do what we can do. But we can see that there is a little bit of tension on and off the pitch. Either way, I think nerves have a tendency to get to our heads, and I believe that that's no different when it comes to players representing their countries at international level, because I'll be honest, like, club football is one thing. Club and WSL football is one thing, but representing your country, whether you're patriotic or not, it's going to be a lot of pressure because you do have a flag on your shoulders for all intents and purposes. And at the end of the day, I think if Ireland make the Euro qualifiers, it's really going to be like an epic sequel to the World Cup appearance that they had in 2023. And McCabe is the face of this squad, undoubtedly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Raised some really, really good points there. I think it's really interesting what you say about kind of home advantage and how much, because I think I was kind of seeing it as just like home advantage is a good thing, but I think it's really interesting what you raise in terms of the pressure that could potentially add to Ireland and whether that adds that edge that might not always benefit them. I think just to raise this one as well, talking about Katie McCabe being an icon for Ireland, you've also got Sophie Ingle, which is sadly missing out, which is really disappointing for such a big set of games. Liberty, I'll come to you on this in terms of, I'll get your perspective a little bit on this kind of home advantage, whether it's a good thing, whether Ireland potentially go into this as favourites as that home advantage, and whether that's a good thing. I know I was looking a little bit at the stats. They edged Wales marginally for possession and XG in the away leg. So I'm wondering whether you think that then, given that they slightly controlled the game in Wales, not necessarily controlled, but they had the better metrics there, whether you think that makes them favourites going to the home leg, or whether you think maybe that tension could offload them, or it's just so close that it's really hard to say.
Yeah, it is really close. It is hard to say, but I do think that there is a bit of pressure, as Gina says. There is, because when you qualified for the last major tournament, and you did so in such like fabulous style as that Scotland game was, another home nations sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Had to come across another home nations to get through. That's what I'm trying to say. Then there's sort of a thing of you could do it again. It may not be Scotland this time, but you can still do it. You did it last time, so why not? So I think there's a pressure there, but I think it's a very cliche that like managers and players and people say like pressure is a privilege, but I do think in a situation like this, it's something that the sort of leaders of both teams are going to harness. I don't imagine that Katie McCabe isn't going to be telling her team that like the pressure of playing at the Aviva in front of 25,000 odd to get to the Euros is not a privilege. The fact that they've made it that far, it's like in touching reach that she'll be saying that to them. But then at the same time, the same conversation is going to be happening for Wales because it was so close. It's basically a clean slate going into the game tomorrow. It's 1-1. Nobody's got the actual advantage of having a go over the other side. So I do think, I agree with this point by Shane, who gets the first goal, who makes that step to say, this is our game, we're going to do this, we're going to score first, or we're going to control the game a bit better. It could go to penalties, which is just not as fun. I'm not a penalties fan, so it's just not as fun for me. But I do think it is whoever takes that sort of step and says, no, this is our game. And it could be either side, because we can sit here and we can say, yeah, Katie McCabe and all these big Irish players, but also Wales have the same. Jeff Fishlock is one of the greatest footballers I think maybe we've ever seen in the game. I actually generally do believe that. I think very underrated, because playing for Wales is obviously the sort of a smaller country sort of aspect, not as well known. And then not playing here in England also makes her slightly less known to people who don't watch the NWSL. And then, you have other players. Obviously, we've said it's really a shame that Sophie Ingle won't be in the team. But then you have, like James and all these players. I just think this is probably going to be the game of tomorrow. Like, nothing else is going to really capture. I'm sorry, Connor. I'm not saying Scotland. But this is going to capture, like, the essence of what these playoffs are for. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm so excited. I'm not at all Welsh or Irish. I'm just about English, and I'm so excited.
You can tell I'm not either.
Yeah, it will certainly be a brilliant game. I think potentially one of the picks to watch of all those games. But we will, Connor, obviously feel free to add anything if you do want to on the Ireland-Wales, but I'll move us on to Scotland versus Finland for our resident Scot, who sounds really Scottish as Liberty and Gina sound Irish or Welsh. Again, overall takeaways from that one, and kind of whether there's a concern over Scotland. There's obviously this lack of striker potentially with Martha Thomas only able to play 61 minutes, I think it was, and whether you thought it was potentially a fair outcome from that first one and what you want to see from the second one. Loads of questions in there. Go at what you want. But yeah, just kind of your take on that game.
Yeah, I mean, it was always going to be a close tie. As I said, obviously, I said this when the ties were obviously confirmed at the time, that Finland are kind of Scotland's nemesis, really denied them last time by a one-goal margin as well. And I think when you're looking at it from Scotland's point of view, you mentioned Martha Thomas. She got substitute for United's Emma Watson, who is not naturally a striker, but again has played there for Scotland at times, because Scotland are a weird side, right? Because they've got world-class players in a couple of positions, and then a couple of championship-level players at the back, and then a couple of good WSL players kind of elsewhere. It's a really weird team to look at on paper, because you've got the highs of like Caroline Weir and Erin Cuthbert, who for me probably get in the Lionesses squad, probably get in a lot of squads around the world. And then you've got some players, I won't name them, that maybe will struggle to get into some championship, high championship sides or low WSL teams. So it's a tough team to watch. I can't lie, when I was watching it, I was expecting a bit more from Scotland being the home side in the first leg. I thought that they would take the game to them a bit more. Don't get me wrong, they had chances. Kirsty Hansen not starting, I think, was a talking point. She's been pretty good for Scotland over the years and everything else. It's interesting actually with Scotland, because again, nothing really, and maybe this is a women's football thing, but the manager doesn't tend to get questioned maybe as much. And I do think when you look at this Scotland team, it's probably better than what it currently is. And I think when that happens, it's not playing as well as it could do when you look at the players. And what I mean by that is, when that happens, you should probably start looking to the manager and the people that are on the sidelines over that. So a little bit disappointing. Still confident. I still think that there's a good chance. I think when you've got Caroline Weir in the team, anything can happen. She's been unreal since she's been back, and a massive, massive boost for Scotland. That midfield of her, Sam Kerr and Erin Cuthbert has been very good. Cuthbert kind of had a bit of an off game against Finland, but I mean, an off game for her is a very good game for most other players. So it's kind of, that's her level. But yeah, the problem Scotland have got is there's not a load of depth. Once you start looking to the bench, and in those crucial games like this where it's going to be tight, and when you're going to need someone to come off the bench and score, Emma Watson's that, in terms of she has scored a couple before. You look down the rest of the bench. Kirsty Hansen obviously came off the bench. That's another type of player, but for Scotland, again, she's kind of one of those ones that creates the opportunities rather than scores them herself. So you need someone else finishing them. Martha Thomas, again, for me, good player in her own right, but she's not that. I don't think she's ever been that. Albeit she did score a lot for Spurs when she first signed there. She was on that golden boot run, and everyone's like, "Who's this?" Like Martha Thomas is coming in scoring like 7 goals in the first couple of games. But for Scotland, it's never really been that. So, yeah, I think if you were a neutral, it probably would have been a bit of a dull game. I can't lie, because it was a bit cagey. It was a bit kind of hit and miss. But yeah, I really hope they can do it, because I think you're getting to the point with some of these players. It's not their last tournament, far from it. But I think when you're Cuthbert and Weir and the likes of, you're going to want to get into this kind of in their prime, which is kind of where they are now. For Watson and Kerr and these other players, they'll come again and everything else. But for those players, I think this is kind of Claire Emsley as well as another player that I've not even mentioned, who was actually really good in the game. I was surprised to see her get taken off towards the end. But yeah, it's a nervy one, put it that way, because as I said, it's always going to be tight. Finland are a very good team, defensively as well. They're a good side. But as I said to you guys backstage, Scotland have beaten Finland away before. Last year, 2-1, I think it was. It's doable. They've done it before, so I'm really hoping tomorrow. And it goes back the last thing I will add on this whole thing about the home nations, there's a bit of tension and everything else. It made me laugh. I've seen some controversy over this over the weekend with Ireland and England, and should Irish fans want England to do well and everything else. I can tell you, as someone supports Scotland, I don't want England doing well in anything. So I was Team USA the other day, hoping that USA and Emma Hayes would get the win at Wembley. So, this is my thing, right? Now, I'm saying that. I will slightly contradict myself. It wouldn't be nice to see Ireland, I think. Sorry, Wales. Sorry, Sean, if you're watching this back. I would like to see Ireland make it through in that one. And I'm not just saying that because Gina's on it, but I would like to see them go through. But yeah, I think you'd struggle to find a lot of Scottish fans that really want England to do well, and vice versa. Maybe, I don't know, but certainly from north of the border, I don't think there's too many Scots up there cheering on England and hoping they do pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's always an interesting one with home nations and like the allegiances, and I think it's potentially slightly different in women's football. Because I do think you could argue that potentially. I don't know. I don't know whether for some fans it is different or whether it's not, because I think from a nationality perspective, I can completely understand why they wouldn't. But there's potentially that. Lucy, I'm more happy for you to come in on this. I guess would like England having won the Euros in 2022 actually have benefited the whole of the British Isles in terms of the visibility is the only thing that I can kind of see. But I also completely get that there's that's not necessarily a reason to support them. I think you can support it in two heads of my actual allegiance and then also seeing what's good for women's football. Libby, is there something you want to say on this point at all?
Yeah, look, I'm not particularly. I'm English. Obviously, very, very English person. But I'm not fully English. I'm part Polish and Russian. Through my dad's side, and so I don't particularly feel connected to the Lionesses. I don't feel particularly strongly whether they win or lose. I didn't buy my ticket for the USA game until last Wednesday, sort of thing. But I saw I believe she was Australian TikToker just before the USA game. Just as I was scrolling through, saying obviously that's a big rivalry in sport as well, and she's basically saying that yeah, she admires the Lionesses, what they've done for the game here. She lives here as well. It wasn't Jamie, if anyone's wondering. It wasn't Jamie, it was somebody else, but I don't remember her name, unfortunately. She's saying she admires them. She's grateful for what they've done for the visibility of the game, all over the world, because it does have a knock-on effect. But she'll never root for England because she doesn't like England. She doesn't like the Lionesses. She can admire that they're talented, but she doesn't care for them. And I think that that's something that women's football fans still kind of have to get their head around, that you can admire a country, a team, a player, and not want them to do well because they don't play for the team or the country you support. I actually had a separate point on Finland and Scotland, which I think is going massively underrated. Cummings and Tuominen, the Finnish goalkeeper, were 2 of the 3 best goalkeepers in the Damallsvenskan last year. Cummings won the Damallsvenskan with Rosengard and conceded like maybe 11 goals. 9 goals last season. And Tuominen is the Hammarby #1, and she, before Cummings sort of had that incredible season last year, was considered the best keeper in the league. And I think that there's a lot of saying that Connor was saying that Finland are very good defensively. I think there's a lot that they did in the game that just kept it as a 0-0. There's that one shot about 20 minutes in, the Caroline Weir takes, she just fizzes it across, just kind of runs onto it and takes a shot. And anyone else you'd think, any other goalkeeper you'd think, that's going in bottom corner. But Tuominen just grabs it and just is like, she bombs it slightly, but she's got it. I think that is such a testament to how that game turned out, that even though some of the chances weren't great and it wasn't like really clean cut chances they were creating, I do think there's something to say that the really good chances from both sides were saved by really good goalkeepers. I do think that's going a bit underrated in this sort of conversation around that game, not just here, but like more widely as well on the outside.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really interesting because I think something that I was kind of going to ask, and you've kind of answered there, which is perfect, is the kind of I don't think like necessarily Finnish football or the Finnish national team is particularly well known, and therefore maybe gets a little bit underrated because there is a familiarity with a lot of the Scottish players kind of in this country. So there's definitely that kind of perception maybe that Scotland should do better than actually they're facing a really solid team in Finland. And I think we maybe appreciate the balance more between Ireland and Wales than we do between Scotland and Finland because of that like kind of regional bias, which is, super interesting, really good point. And thank you for bringing that bit of Damallsvenskan insight that we always love to hear from, which is absolutely brilliant. So and we'll move on a little bit then to the other games that are going on. We had some good chat about your other point as well in the chat, that kind of idea that you can admire. I think I completely agree with this point, that I can really dislike teams, shall we say, but at the same time really admire that they're actually really, really good, and kind of take pleasure in hating how good they are a lot of the time. And very much the same with Chelsea there from my perspective. But Gina, I'll come to you on the next one. In terms of Northern Ireland versus Norway, and I know Erling will be particularly interested in this, but I think from a Northern Ireland perspective as well, obviously Norway have won 4-0 there. Is that a concern that they go away to Norway and that margin gets even bigger? And how do we think that they'll be able to compete, or do we think this could be a bit of a washout? I know Graham Hansen loves a goal against Northern Ireland, so just how can you see that one going? And is it maybe a little bit of a concern that there could be a quite high scoreline in that one?
I think so, considering the scoreline from the last game as well. I think with Northern Ireland, they're determined to show that it wasn't a fluke, them having qualified for the last Euros. And it's remarkable considering, because, there have been so many calls in terms of making Northern Irish women's football professional, and that's been achieved to an extent. But I mean, the same thing goes for the Republic. I think that the resources are there for all intents and purposes, because if we look at it, and I know I'm getting a bit off topic when it comes to the Northern Irish and Norway game, but I think when we look at the WSL, for example, the highest number of expat players are people from Ireland, or Irish internationals. So obviously the talent's there. I mean, of course, there are some players that are, like, for example, English-born or American-born, but have acquired Irish citizenship through a grandparent or something. It's something known as the granny rule in Ireland. So that's another thing that gives Ireland an advantage. But my point is that the resources, at least at youth level, should be there for the women. And they are to an extent, but even in the Irish Domestic League, in the Women's Premier Division, there remains very little opportunity for improvement past the age of 19. The fact that a U21 a U23 team has failed to materialize when it comes to Ireland is ridiculous, because it shows the lack of organization. It shows that 5 years ago, there was a statement by a lawyer when the Irish national team went forward to the FAI. And they went to a press conference and complained about how the FAI were treating them, the conditions that they were forced to perform under. And their representative said that they were treated like they were dirt on the FAI's shoe. And to an extent, we're basically seeing the surface of how things have improved. But if we look beneath the surface, we can see that very little has improved. And, the caliber, and I say this as someone that has covered the Women's Premier Division as much as I've covered the WSL, the caliber is there. But, obviously, it is a bit more competitive in the WSL, and it's hard to make that transition. And my point is, I think that also reflects on Northern Ireland as well, because Northern Ireland has even less opportunities in terms of resources allocated to women's football at youth development level than the Republic of Ireland. So I think that the Northern Irish national team has been given the short end of the stick. It's really relying on, a few homegrown players, and then some people that have decided to represent Northern Ireland, Holloway, for example, at international level, qualifying through an ancestor or such. And I think coming up against a team like Norway, that's going to be pretty tough to beat. And I know, part of me wants them to succeed. Obviously, I want them to succeed because, I will. And I don't want to sound, because I think this is a really American thing to say, but I will root for the underdog. And as we were just saying over there, it's not that I like the U.S. women's national team. I think that they're a trailblazing team, but they're not the first team that I would support on the international stage. If it was the Irish team, while I'm not Irish in any way, shape, or form, they have my heart because they're so in touch with the community. Having lived in Ireland for 4 years, I think what I can see is a very small place, and that reflects when it comes to the women's national team because they're so human, for lack of a better term. They're so nice and open, and you come across people, whether it's your taxi driver or whether it's someone in a store that knows of someone who knows someone on the team. It's so small, and they're just a really good team, and it's very different to I think the Lionesses, for example, and the US women's national team, these teams that have been put on such a high pedestal. And we can see the reason why they're so well reputed is because they have the resources. England has the best non-league football in the world. Both men and women non-league teams have the best resources in the world. And that obviously trickles down to senior international level. And the same thing with the US. It's a different kind of youth development system in terms of the pay-to-play system, but I can't even dive into that because I have so many thoughts on that. And that's the thing. That's why I find it very hard to support the US women's national team and the Lionesses. I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but I hope I could convey my thoughts across coherently.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting and really, really good points that are raised. We also had some in the chat at the start of the show. Sweden and Norway in the qualifiers is crazy because of all the talent they have. But also Erlen saying that there's potential that Caroline Graham-Hansen's arrested tomorrow and then potential repercussions on kind of crowds that might draw. Liberty, I was just wondering kind of your take on that potential fixture and whether the absence of CGH gives Northern Ireland any chance, or and just the kind of having obviously Sweden won 2-0 as well in their qualifier. Just those two being in this kind of round at this point, if you draw them, what does that kind of do to the teams that are facing them?
Whether or not Caroline Graham-Hansen is rested, I don't think changes anything because the players that Norway have in that the ability to bring in that front line, even if she's not there, is crazy. I don't remember who they started other than her. I'm imagining it was Brighton. But even there's some kids in that Norway squad at the moment that score a good couple goals. Anyone who's not familiar with Kathinka Tamberg, she's 20-year-old. She signed for Hammarby in the summer and then scored 9 goals and 11 appearances in the second half of the season for them, including they were the important goal that saw them through to the group stages of the Champions League. She is not a winger. She's an out-and-out 9. She's actually probably one of the most like-for-like replacements with Ed Hegelberg I've ever seen, as I wrote earlier in something I was writing. She's very Hegelberg-esque, but she can play outside on the wing if needed, but she scores goals. That's kind of the whole point. And I mean, thank you, Joe. Even outside of her, I mean, that goals come from across that Norway line when they get in the right mood. I would still fear Norway even without her, purely because they just score, and they know when the time is right, they can just score. That is simple as it is, because they have the talent, as we're talking about. I think we look back to the World Cup and it was a fluke. I think it was the situation of the managing everything that was happening. There was obviously some big tensions in camp, but I think they know that qualifiers are when they really have to show up. I mean, they did it in the last round. They scored an insane amount of goals and just kind of got it over and done within the first leg. And 4 is not as much as they did last time, but it's a good start. And yeah, I would fear them. I'd fear Sweden if I had to come up against them. I'd fear Denmark, because get Pernille Harder in the right mood and she'll score a good couple too. I think that there's something to be said about these teams that have this sort of European big names in their squads, and they're the ones that kind of leading these kind of smaller, not really, because they're all like experienced in major tournaments now, but there is something to be said about how they have to go through this extra competitive level once again. Somebody said earlier that it was a shame that Sweden got drawn in the same group as England and France. I do think that does play a part in it as well, because it is just luck of the draw in those situations. But I do also think that these countries know when the time is right, then just get the job done, and then you're through to next summer and you don't really have to worry too much, which I think is probably the mentality most of them are going into tomorrow with.
Yeah, absolutely. To run through the kind of scores, obviously Sweden, as you mentioned, were away in Serbia and they won 2-0. Ukraine were beaten 2-0 at home by Belgium. Poland currently lead 1-0, which we mentioned, against Austria. They played in Gdansk and will go to Austria. That could be quite an interesting tie coming up. I think potentially another one to look out for. And then also mentioned Portugal currently drawing 1-1 with Czechia, and they go away to the Czech Republic, Czechia. However you want to split it. Connor, do you have anything to add on those matches, or anyone from the panel jump in if you kind of want to mention anything at this point? Liberty, I can see you're raring to go, so do go for it, because I don't want to kind of miss any of those matches.
If she takes my player again, I'm not going to be... No, go for it. I want to see if you do now. I want to see if you highlight one.
If I'm about to say what you want to say, I apologize, but I just want to say that Poland going into... Okay, we're good. Poland going into the second leg, 1-0 up against Austria is massive. I think anyone who knows me knows that I think Eva Pajor is the best striker in the world. I genuinely think that, and I think that she's very, very underrated, but she's also the captain of this Poland team, and she has led them from, like, quite literally from the front for so long now. She is considered their best player, because she is, that there is no kind of denying that. But this will be their, if they've qualified, this will be their first major tournament, and they are one of the smaller countries that don't have the same type of investment and don't have the same type of conversations happening around them that these other countries do. They haven't got Lionesses and US Women National Team level of investment. They probably don't even have really like island levels, unfortunately, because that's just kind of not how it really works. I mean, if we look at the men's kind of Poland team, we can name a couple more players, but it's not like a full 11 that you can name. I think it's like Lewandowski, and maybe if you're a Premier League fan like Kivior, that's kind of it. This would be so massive if Poland managed to do it. If they can get through to the Euros, this is going to be massive for them, massive for what the sport can do, what it can do for the sport in the country, because Eva's kind of whole thing, her whole kind of shtick, if you want, is pushing Polish football. She is, yeah, same. She's kind of wanting to push for better access to girls in football in Poland. And unfortunately, sometimes when a national team isn't performing to its sort of best ability, because I do think that they are a very good team and they can make it in a major tournament. They can do well. They're not going to win it, but they can like push. That funding isn't there, as we were talking about with Ireland and Northern Ireland. I think that if they do it, then it just proves that these smaller countries that we're seeing rise in women's football are pushing for Euros, for World Cups, for anything. And I think, yeah, it would be massive for football in Poland. And I'm biased. I am part Polish. I'm very biased, and Pajor is one of my favorite players. So that's no guesses where my allegiances are in that game.
Yeah, no, that wasn't where I was going to go. I was actually going to quickly go back to Norway and just kind of highlight the fact that I say this every international tournament, but I don't know whether Erling's going to agree with this, but I feel like this is a massive tournament for them. Should they, obviously, I would imagine they're going to get there now. But they need to, this is a team, you're looking at Norway going back to the 90s, early 2000s, that were winning big tournaments, and everything else. They're not a new team on the block kind of coming through. They are a well-established women's football side. Now, they've got some unbelievable players, and then we mentioned Hegerberg's been mentioned. She didn't even start this game. I think they started Sievik, or however you say her name, at top with Hansen and Wright on either side, and then obviously Bo Reeser and Engen at midfield. But you're looking at the players that are missing at the moment. I don't think Blackstad was called up, or she might be injured, I don't know, but Turlin's injured, obviously, from a United point of view. Lisa Nilsson as well. It's not like they had a full-strength team either at the moment, so I think their squad is better. I stand by that. Obviously, particularly over here in England, everyone looks at Norway and thinks back to the Euros and what England did to them, obviously in the 22 in the Euros then. Now, I think Norway have moved on since then. I have just been corrected on Blackstad. Liberty's filled me in. She's with the 23s. There we go. So that answers that one. But that's what I mean. Another player that's coming through as well. Norway is stacked for youngsters. There are quite a few at Vålerenga as well that are kind of coming through, who held Bayern recently as well in the Champions League. So there's some good players there. But this Norwegian team, I think, they have to have a good tournament. They can't go through another tournament of what I would call failure. Because even at the World Cup, even though they got through the groups it was looking a bit touch and go for them for a little bit. They can't go through that again. So they need to have a strong Euros. Their backline, I agree with Erling, is probably it is their weakest point. They've got Tuva Hansen, who's not naturally a left back kind of playing out there at the moment. I think the centre backs are better with Bergsvand and Harvigen. I think that's better than what they've had in previous years. But again, it's maybe not as strong when you come up against the top team. So I'm confident for them in terms of, because they will get there. But it's more of a case of when they get there, now what? Like, what is their kind of identity with this team? Because they do this a lot. They win a lot of friendlies and win a lot of the qualifiers and get there. Then they get to the tournament and it just falls apart for whatever reason. So, yeah, I'm rooting for them a little bit because I do have a soft spot for Norway in some ways. Obviously, we've got, from a United point of view, there's 3 players that should kind of be there or thereabouts. Anvil de Berisa obviously used to be at United as well, which is kind of a fan favourite when she was here. So they've just got a very likeable team. In my opinion, I would struggle to find anyone, I think, when you look at that Norway team and think there's an unlikable player in there, whereas I think other teams you could probably find somebody. What did I just say there? Yeah, we need to get out to the group. Yeah, I agree. And it's there. The talent is there. The depth, I think, is, again, maybe not as strong as some of the real top teams, but it's there as well. It's good enough to compete, and I think it's a huge tournament for them because the last couple have been blamed on the managers, rightly so. They've changed again. How often can you keep blaming the manager? If you keep changing the manager and the same thing keeps happening, you then start having to look at the players in the tournament stage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really interesting points. What I'm going to do, we're running out of time so quickly here. We've spent a good amount on the Euro qualifiers, which I think is really important to do. So I will do a little bit on England and the friendly between the US. But there has been this shout, favourites are Spain, Sweden and Denmark. So I'm going to put the panel on the spot a little bit here and just go around each of you, very short explanations because we don't have a lot of time, which might make it even worse for you to not be able to justify yourselves. But just a quick favourites at this point in time for the Euros next summer. It's a horrible question, but I'm going to take pleasure in doing it. So have a quick think while I'm talking, and then I'll come around to each of you. I'm not going to pick someone, but if any one of you are ready to go, you are muted. Go for it.
Yeah, even though I think they're still losing tonight, I'm going to go with Germany. Again, like I said, it's not really. This is probably the wrong time to be saying it because they're currently losing, I think, right now to Italy. So maybe not. But I don't know. Obviously, third at the Olympics. There's a very good team like there. Obviously, runners up last time. Everyone's going to say Spain, right? Because obviously, the talent they've got and everything else. England, obviously, defending champions, so there's them as well. But I'm not going to name everyone else. I'll let other people do that. But I think Germany for me. There's a very good team there, and as I said, runners up, so they can't be that bad.
Liberty, I can see you going ready for it, or Gina. Either of you, whoever wants to get in first, go for it.
I'll go. I mean, obviously, like I've dedicated a lot of my time to covering Ireland, so if they get in, of course, I'd say they'd be a favorite. But I'm Italian from my father's side of the family, so I have to support Italy as well. They're a close second in terms of the team that I follow. So I love the fact that they're in the Euros already, and I really want to see that success expand in Germany. Sorry, I was reading the chat. In Italy at a national level, because compared to other female leagues in Europe, the Serie A Feminina has not really prospered in the same way in terms of not just the exposure, but the investment. I mean, there has been investment now, and like from the World Cup, we saw like Rai decided to invest in women's football to broadcast the tournament, but they almost did so begrudgingly, and it really hasn't taken off when you look at other leagues like the WSL or in France or in Germany. So hopefully the Euros and maybe them doing well in the Euros will bring more exposure to that.
Ordinarily, I would say Germany, but as me and Connor are stealing each other's today, I won't say Germany, but know that that's up here. Instead, I'm going to say I think there's two. I think France have a very big chance. France have already qualified, right? Yeah, because they're playing friendlies at the moment. Yeah, sorry. Just had to make sure I continued. France, I think obviously it was quite a disappointing Olympics. And especially for home Olympics, I think they probably should have done more. But I do think that they're slowly breeding in young talent. I think there is a sort of a refresh happening. So I say, why not? They've always sort of in and around the sort of kind of knockout stages. So them. And as somebody said in the chat, I think a couple of people have now said it, so apologies. I say Netherlands as well. Why not? I think once again, there's been a refresh of the squad. And by the time Euros come around, they'll have players back, players that then played like a full season after coming back from injuries. Jill Roord, Viviana Miedema, kind of players like this that are big players for the Netherlands and big sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. Big in sort of knockout football. We've seen it in previous tournaments. And yeah, I think now is the time that maybe they're going to push it back up again, because do you think they fell off a bit? Maybe they weren't pushing as much as they should have been. And I think, probably now's the time to reassert themselves amongst the sort of elite in Europe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've got plenty of discussion in the chat as well. I'll show a few of them. I think I've started some of the first ones. So if you've done it recently, Liberty.
I'm very sorry. I'm sorry. In the time that we have been on this stream, I have received a message that will make more sense if I don't think we're going to get time to say it, but I have a message from a German friend called Common that says, "Hello, just wanted to say that Laura bleep Freigang is currently the captain of Germany." Sorry. If you know me at all, you know that's kind of massive. I'm not sure anyone cares, but just putting that out there in case anyone does care. Apparently, Laura Freigang had the captain's armband on, even though they have just lost to Italy. Thank you.
Well, that is a big announcement for anyone that follows any Liberty channels. So, yeah, we'll see if we get time for a 30-second cameo of Freigang, because I understand that is important, and even more so with the captain's armband. But yeah, just a few quick comments. Spain, Germany, and England, similar here, but adding in France, Netherlands. Dan's got a bit confused and given Germany and then Netherlands, so slight confusion there, maybe changing mind. Joe's also back in Germany, so plenty of various teams getting mentioned, which hopefully just means it's going to be another really exciting summer in Switzerland, so that'll be brilliant. We will do a very little section now on England versus the USA. I've not time kept very well here, but we'll try our best. First of all, was anyone there? I know, Liberty, I think you said, Gina, did you manage to go down to Wembley? That's all.
Unfortunately, I would have loved to, but I had someone visiting, so I was watching at home though, which is good. I mean, and again, like I said, I think I gave the impression that I'm a bit hard on the US women's team, but no, I mean, obviously, if they're up against anyone else, I'll be Star Spangled Awesome all the way. But it was great. It was great to see Emma Hayes, I guess, return back to her country. And it was sort of prophetic in that way, because I think a lot of the time I think there was like that moment where I think Girma it was who looked at her when she was like, had forgotten a couple lines of the Star Spangled Banner. And she was like, oh, I wanted to sing both national anthems. And it was interesting to see that crossover between Chelsea players that were in the England squad and the American players that Hayes was now coaching. So it's amazing to see sort of how those two sides meet, and for Hayes to come back. And honestly, I'll go out on a limb and say I think Sarina Wiegman and Emma Hayes are two of the best coaching minds that we have ever seen in the women's game. 110%.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge clash. I guess key takeaways, potentially England managing to keep that clean sheet, but then this being a very good point that only 0.07 XG. It's pretty low on chances. Obviously, you've got the injuries thrown in there to arguably key attackers. Connor, just wanted to come to you on this one. Do you think, I guess, like an important clean sheet, do you think, for England, given the context of the fact that they conceded against South Africa, lost 4-3 to Germany before that? Important to get that against, obviously, the US being a big side, or just kind of, maybe disappointing to not do a little bit better going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, actually, because it's very United-esque. Create very little going forward, but pretty solid defensively. And then Sarina obviously came out and said she was really happy with it. That's very Mark Skinner, that is. Not comparing the two, for anyone watching this, thinking I'm comparing the two, for the love of God. But no, it is important from an England point of view, I think. There's still quite a few places, I think, when you talk about, we're just talking obviously about the Euros next year, there's still a lot of places, I think, in that Lionesses squad that are still question marks. Maybe potentially one of the midfield positions, a couple of maybe the forward line, and even a couple of the back line, and obviously the goalkeeper as well, whether that's going to be Hampton or Mary. So, from that point of view, good for the players that are playing, or started at least, obviously, because that's good for them that they can come up against such a good team like the US and hold them out to a clean sheet. So I didn't watch the game, so I'm caveat everything I'm saying by the fact that I'm purely going off what I'm reading literally as you've asked the question. But yeah, it's a good experimental time for Sarina. Obviously, I know she spoke earlier in the press conference. She's going to rotate a lot for the game tomorrow. Sarina, if you're watching this, you're not. But if you do manage to catch this before tomorrow's game, don't play May Letizia, please. It's not worth the risk. She's just come off the back of concussion. So just leave her out. It's fine. She might be a bit hurt by that, but United fans will thank you for it. Don't play her. It's fine. We can live with that. So there's that as well. But yeah, if there's a lot of rotation tomorrow, it'd be interesting to see what the back line is and whether England can keep another clean sheet, because they're going to need that momentum. And going into the Euros, there is going to be pressure on them because now there's expectation. I think they saw that in the World Cup. As soon as you become the champion, then you go into the tournament as one of the favourites. Whereas I don't think England in the when they won it were the favourites. They were one of. They were in that kind of conversation a little bit, but yeah, it's going to be a bit different for them. So yeah, it's good for England to keep a clean sheet. Obviously, I needed that, but intrigued to see where the kind of system goes because Serena's changed a lot, with a lot of different players. So that's something to keep an eye on, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's interesting comments in terms of maybe England being a little bit cowardly with the tactics in terms of the attacking the USA, and then also kind of US just being on a wave of form. Given the triple espresso miss, but then also you've got Lauren Hemp, Lauren James, Ella Toone out of the England team. Liberty, what were your thoughts on like how much those injuries perhaps impacted the performance, and whether you think, given the injuries that the USA were kind of facing, England should have been maybe a little bit more offensive in that game?
Yeah. They should have been. I think they were probably a bit cowardly. But at the same time, the big injuries weren't in the USA's backline. They were always going to have Germa. I think probably the most surprising thing was that Emily Sonnet was next to her at centre back. And then Emily Fox was always going to start. And was it Liam Wilms? No, it was Kruger at the back. But anyway, it was kind of a set back line. It was not really going to change too much. I think that probably stunted England more than they would have liked. I think the Germany game was a mess. Thank you. Somebody just said, confirmed it was Kruger. Thank you very much. I think that there was such defensive sort of messes from both teams that it was very unsettled, that this felt too settled, and then the attackers from both sides sort of didn't want to take that chance and push the defenders too much. That being said, Naomi Gomez is incredible, so it is kind of hard to fight against her. But that being said, I do think that there was a very clear lack of Lauren Hemp for England. And she tried to replace her by putting Mead on that wing and bringing Jess Naz on. It didn't work. I'm sorry, it really didn't work. I thought Beth Mead was good, but there was nothing. There was nothing else. You can be good, but if you're not getting the goals, then what's the point? The Lionesses have missed Lauren James for a long time now. Last camp, they missed her as well. And it's very obvious when she's not in the camp that they do miss her, and there's nobody else who's doing what she does, which makes her world class. But that really sucks. It's the same way I think we felt about Kira Walsh a couple of years ago, where it was like nobody else can do what she does, and it hurts England. Yeah. That being said, somebody said earlier something about England, about Russo having no one else, and it's a sentiment I've seen a lot. No one else is helping her. She's trying to basically do it all, and there's no one else working around her. I think we saw that for Arsenal a couple points this season, and some points last season as well. And unfortunately, it's starting to trickle into the Lionesses, and I think that needs to be sorted out really quickly, because whether you like it or not, Russo is England's starting number 9 now, and your opinions on Russo kind of don't matter, because she's going to start the Euros and she's going to start every competitive game for England until she retires, basically, at this point. And I think there needs to be sort of a figuring out of how to help get the best out of her from the wingers as well, because I think once you unlock Russo, everyone else sort of falls into place a bit. I think sometimes you do have to build from your 9 back. And I think that's something that England still haven't quite got right with Russo, where the same way that I think they probably did have it right under Ellen White. But yeah, that's all I really have to say.
No, it's really interesting. Yeah, sorry. No, I'm going to come to you in a minute, my next question is specific to Gina, so bear with, and then I will absolutely come to you. And I think it's also interesting that the Stanway Walsh pivot has been used a lot, which kind of leads me on to my next question perfectly in the segue, because I saw someone kind of comment on the fact that Jess Park was having to drop deep a lot to help out Stanway and Walsh, which has come maybe a little bit stale in that pairing, or people have got used to it, or they're just not in the form that they necessarily were previously. And then that obviously left Russo isolated, kind of like you were saying, in many ways. So questions for Gina, obviously feel free to make the point that you were also going to make. But this will probably be like relatively near the end of England as well. So if anyone wants to add anything onto this, please do feel free to jump in. There's been a comment about Grace Clinton going into the midfield. So that speaks to that rotation point. And so I guess, do you think England needs a bit more rotation from Wiegman? I know she said she's potentially going to, but that has obviously been an ongoing talking point, that we see this kind of similar lineup. And then also there has been this comment which is directed at you. So if you have any thoughts on this as well, please do feel free to share them. But yeah, anything that you were going to say as well, just rotation and your point. Brilliant.
Yeah, so I think I'll address England first, and then I'll address the comment to me. But I think with England going into the Euros, it's very much that sort of, now it's like what I was talking about before with Ireland. I think with, having the World Cup, for example, in the case of Ireland, having the World Cup in their arsenal now, pun, Katie McCabe in Arsenal. No, but like having that in the back of their arsenal now, and then now having to contend with getting into the Euros again, not again, but like another major tournament, it's going to be a lot of pressure. And I feel like it's the same thing for England. I think they're kind of slipping up. I know people don't really pay a lot of attention to friendlies, but I think friendlies are extremely important because they're indicative of how a team would do with perhaps higher levels of opposition, like we saw between the Lionesses and the United States women's national team. So the fact that I do think midfield struggled. Again, I agree with the comment that like Lauren James's absence was felt completely. You could feel it. I honestly think Alessia Russo, there were times that she would run to the US goal, and there was no one helping her. There was no one there. She was the one doing all the work. And at the end of the day, I think Alessia Russo is an exceptional player, but there's only so much one player can do. And so I do think that Wiegman really needs to make those rotations. I am happy to see Erbs back in goal, but I honestly think Hampton would have been a better choice for that match because, again, Hampton would have been familiar with Emma Hayes and how she, her offensive and her defensive layouts. And again, I think that England has a major advantage over the US in these terms because obviously more English players play for Chelsea and are very familiar with the long reign of Emma Hayes and her strategies, regardless of whether or not she changes up her lineups, like when it comes to international level as opposed to club level. But again, they're familiar with it. So England and the English internationals have a major advantage over the US team in terms of the ones that have played for Chelsea in the past. And so I think that it's to Wiegman's credit that she's done this well so far, but she really needs to shake up that midfield. That midfield is the Achilles heel that England are going to have going into the Euros next summer. And they have some real competition. I'm not going to lie. Ever since Spain won the World Cup, I think Spain's going to be another one. And I do believe they are set to face Spain at Wembley. So that's going to be a very interesting fixture as well, because it will be the first time that they faced off since the World Cup in that infamous final. But just to address the Ali Sentnor comment addressed to me, I do think it's great to see her in the lineup. To have that first cap is no small feat. She's done so well. She was exceptional throughout her collegiate career with North Carolina, and moving out of that and going into the Utah Royals at such a young age. I mean, my God, she's only 20. I mean, I'm 20. I'm 22. It makes me feel like I'm like, sometimes no matter how talented I feel like I am, I will never be that talented on the pitch, unfortunately. But no, it's great to see her do so well. And again, I do think. So when it comes to the U.S. team, not just having Emma Hayes as a new manager, but I do think we're entering a new era of the U.S. women's team in general, like seeing the retirement of the greats like Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgan, for example, they were a generation, but now we are seeing that shift, and we are seeing sort of not just the Emma Hayes era, like I said, but we're seeing all these new players come in, and it's going to be, I think, a great future for the team. I think the Olympics win is what they really needed, because again, I think everyone knows this well enough that their confidence was shattered since the last World Cup, unfortunately. But now we're going to really see a new era for the US women's team, and I couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. I've massively run over, but I will give 30 seconds for Liberty to do Freigang and any like kind of friendly international stuff. So do fire away, please.
I'm going to be so unbelievably brief, you don't even realise. Germany, they lost tonight to Italy, as we've discussed, I think. They lost 2-1. But they played Switzerland, obviously hosts of Euros next year, on Friday night. And they've got a new manager. And he said, basically, he thinks Laura Freigang is a 10. He was like, yeah, she's a 10, she's a 10, she's a 10. I just want her to score more goals. Which is quite funny because she's currently the top goal scorer in the Frauen Bundesliga this season. But he was like, he just needs to score more goals. She hadn't scored for the national team since 2021. Until Friday night. She comes on at halftime. She scores a brace, a really good brace actually. Both of them coming from Pia Sophia Volta, out at fullback. Obviously her Eintracht Frankfurt teammate. It's two really good finishes, and then she sets up the assist. She sets up the assist for somebody. I can't remember off the top of my head. It wasn't Chulo, it was somebody else. I can't remember her name. But she sets up a really good assist as well. She had a very, very good game. She then played, obviously, the game they lost tonight. But I do think she had a really good game in that. The bit I watched before we came on here. Oberdorf will be out until next summer. Maybe April time. She was out just before the Olympics. So that's like 9 months on from then. Depending on how quickly she heals. But she did her whole knee. It wasn't just her ACL. She did like every single part, unfortunately, as she's come out and said recently, so she may be a bit longer. But yeah, it's really nice to see Freigang taking this opportunity in a populous world. There's a spot to fill at the number 10 for Germany, and I think Freigang is going to take it, and I think she will potentially be pushing to be the starting number 10 for Germany come Nations League and then into the Euros. And it's really, really exciting to see because she's a player I've admired and liked for a very long time now, and said that she needed that chance to push into Germany 11. She was always the person subbed on, never the person starting, and now it looks to me that I'm not German. I don't speak any German, so I apologize for that pronunciation if it's really badly. But he seems to trust her already, and it's an exciting future. I think that Germany are a really exciting outlet. He likes a lot of youngsters. Most of his work comes from the sort of youth stages in Germany in the boys' side. And he appreciates the youngsters. He's getting them called up, getting lots of first caps across the board. And that's it. I'm done. Yay, Freigang.
I think it's nicely summed up here, which is perfect. No, thank you for that. And obviously so much more to talk about over the international break, but sadly I've not time kept amazingly tonight. Also, one thing that I was going to potentially bring up, which we haven't had time for, is the Fifth Pro kind of nomination. So if you want a good laugh, do go and look at them, because that's just kind of a look at it and take it apart, because some of them are absolutely woeful. But we will wrap it there. So I'll go around the panel and do the usual kind of anything you want to shout out. So Gina, where can we find your work if people want to know more about you, social media handles, who you write for, etc.? Just a brief shout out for your work.
Yeah, most of the time now I'm writing for the Irish Post newspaper. So it's a national newspaper that serves the Irish expat community here in Britain. And RTE, BBC Sport Northern Ireland, and the Sporting News I've joined recently for more of like a exposure to the American sports media as well. I used to be at the Telegraph, but not with them anymore. Interned with them for a week not that accomplished, I promise. But yeah, that's where to find me. My Twitter handle is at Gina Bagnulo3, and LinkedIn is Gina Bagnulo.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, Telegraph sounds very impressive. Liberty, where can we find you?
Just Liberty Simons. I've got some really cool stuff coming out in like maybe the next week. If you want to go read that, some really cool interviews. Especially if you're a big WSL fan, maybe if you want to go. But yeah, they're just Liberty Simons. 1M, no 2 M's, 1M. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you very much. Yeah, definitely, I'll keep an eye out for them. And Connor, anything to add from you?
Yeah, well, following these two for a start and liking this video and subscribing. On a slightly different note, and I apologise, I'm going to really dampen the move for like 30 seconds, but please bear with me. For people who maybe haven't seen, this is men's football slightly, but there is a women's football connection here. If people watch, obviously, United men, they'll probably know Stretford Paddock. Unfortunately, this afternoon, Abdullah, who's obviously a massive part of that, passed away at an incredibly young age. And the reason I'm saying this on here is because Stretford Paddock did give me and Jess a massive platform to promote the United women's team. They're a very big part of us. Abdullah as a person was amazing and very good with me. So I'm quite happy and proud that I've managed to do an hour and 15 to be fair, without, yeah. But if that shows, obviously, that life is very short, it is. And it shows as well, I think, the power of what we're doing and obviously fan channels and everything else talking about, whether it's men's football, women's football, whatever. Because the love, obviously, that has seen since that got announced earlier on is quite something. So yeah, apologies, damn in the mood a little bit, but I did want to mention that because Paddock as a platform has been very good for women's football, very good for United Women, obviously, in particular, because they are a United men's channel. And obviously, yeah, pretty gutting, I can't lie. But yeah, we move on, so to speak. But yeah, I just thought that was worth a mention because it's made me it has hit hard, that one, and it has made me realize things like this that we're doing does have a big impact on a lot of people, you know. So yeah, I thought that was worth a little bit of a mention. But liking this video and subscribing as well, because what Laura's done tonight, put on a great show as well, got these amazing guests together, and yeah, more of that next week. We need to discuss this FIFA Pro thing, by the way, so I've got some comments on that as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely discuss that. And yeah, obviously very sad news, but all our thoughts from all for Woeful and everyone is certainly there at the moment. So thank you all for joining us. And we hope, yeah, we gave a good show. And obviously join us on Wednesday with Barry for the Lower League Lingo show to round up all the lower league shows, get following everyone on this panel and subscribing. And we will obviously see you very soon next week and on Wednesday. So take care until then.